The jury in the trial of the man accused of murdering Grace Millane has been given two very different accounts of what happened the night she died. In closing its case today, the Crown told the jury the British backpacker would have struggled for her life as the 27-year-old accused strangled her to death. This was disputed by the man's defence team, who said it was entirely plausible the young woman accidentally died after he choked her during sex with her consent and encouragement. Our reporter Sarah Robson was in court to hear the closing addresses today, and she joins me in the studio now. And as always, a reminder that some of what we are discussing may be distressing for some people. Evening, Sarah. So, Brian Dickey, the Crown prosecutor, he was the first to make his closing address to the jury, and what did he have to say?
Yes, Mr Dickey explained to the jury, first of all, that there are two different pathways to murder. So they could find the accused man guilty of murder by murderous intent, or there's actually a second pathway, which is reckless intent or disregard for someone's life. Now, he described this as conscious risk-taking. Now, Mr Dickey said that there's actually enough evidence in the Crown's case that the jury would be able to deliver a guilty verdict through either of these pathways. Now, Mr Dickey spoke a lot about the evidence that the Crown and the defence actually called from forensic pathologists. Now, he actually cited the defence expert who told the jury earlier in the week that it takes between 5 and 10 minutes to kill someone by strangulation. Now, his point is, at some point as this is happening, the person who is being strangled will pass out. So Mr Dickey was saying that therefore the accused must have kept going, must have continued strangling Grace Millane, even though she was limp and lifeless under his hand. Now, he said, therefore, this definitely isn't a case of rough sex gone wrong. Mr Dickey also spoke about motive, which is something we haven't heard a lot of in the trial so far. Now, as he was talking about this, he held up to the jury the 7 explicit photographs that the Crown says the accused took of Ms Millane after she had died. Now, these are explicit photographs. And Mr Dickey was saying that the accused had taken these photographs for his own sexual gratification. He said, Mr Dickey described them as being the accused's triumph over Ms Millane, and he called them the accused's trophy photos. Now, as Mr Dickey was explaining this to the jury, Ms Millane's parents, Gillian and David, who have been sitting in the front row of the public gallery for the last 3 weeks, Mrs Millane broke down in tears again, held her head in her hands. Mr Dickey also discussed the accused man's actions after Ms Millane's death. Now, Mr Dickey says that these point to a cover-up of what the accused had done, and that he was trying to cover his tracks, and he knew that what he had done was murder. So these are things like the CCTV footage that we've seen. He went out and hired a rental car. So he cited that CCTV footage again and described the accused man's demeanour in that. Mr Dickey said he appeared to be cool, calm and collected as he was going about all those tasks. We also heard a bit more about the Google searches that happened in the early hours of December the 2nd. So those were the Google searches for Waitakere Ranges and Hottest Fire. Mr Dickey was saying why would he search these things unless he was trying to hide Ms Millane's body. Now, Mr Dickey also made the point that to the jury that in all murder cases, manslaughter is technically available for the jury to consider, but neither side in this case has actually suggested that there's evidence to support that, and Mr Dickey says that the jury should be finding the accused guilty of murder.
Right, so what did the defence have to say when they wrapped up?
Yeah, so Ian Brookie gave his closing address to the jury this afternoon. He urged them to calmly, logically and conscientiously go through the evidence that they have heard over the last 3 weeks. Now, the defence maintains that Ms Millane's death was an accident during consensual rough sex, and absolutely isn't murder. He said this was an unfortunate and unforeseen consequence of rough sex between two drunk and inexperienced young people. Now, Mr. Brookie also discussed the accused man's actions after Ms. Millane's death. He acknowledged that to the jury they may seem like he was acting badly, that he was selfish, and they might find those actions reprehensible. But he said that his client freaked out, and he urged the jury to consider that actually those actions don't tell them much about what was going on through the accused man's mind as he actually put his hands on Ms. Millane's neck, which is obviously the critical part of what the jury must be considering. Now, Mr. Brookie also talked about how the accused had voluntarily gone to the police. He had actually, in the second interview, told them what had happened the night Ms. Millane died, and actually ended up leading them to where he had buried her body. He said that there was ample evidence to support the accused's account that the British backpacker had actually instigated and encouraged restraint, choking, etc. during their sexual encounter.
So two very contrasting ideas of what happened, up to the jury to decide which one they believe. So what happens from here?
So we have almost drawn to the conclusion of what we will hear in court. So tomorrow, Justice Simon Moore will sum up the case for the jury tomorrow morning. And after that, a couple of hours it will likely take, the jury will begin their deliberations. Now, this trial was originally set down for 5 weeks, and we are just getting to the end of week 3 at the moment. So it has progressed a lot quicker than lawyers had initially expected.
So they'll begin their deliberations, it's expected by lunchtime tomorrow.
Perhaps by lunchtime tomorrow.
Okay, Sarah, thank you so much. Sarah Robson there with the details of that ongoing trial.